Ladies and gentlemen, I am Israel, the game is World of Warships, and I can't believe Wargaming have done this. They've put the Kamikaze on sale in the European, Asian and American stores. For those of you not familiar with her, the Kamikaze, Divine Wind class of destroyers were a development of the Minikaze class. They were slightly bigger, they had a reinforced bridge, and while they were a couple of knots slower, they were considered fast enough for the job, and the modifications also made them slightly more stable. The class's war record is mostly missable. 9 ships were built, and of note is that one of them was the first Japanese warship to be sunk in World War II. On the 11th of December 1941, Japanese forces were making their first assault on Wake Island when the shore batteries opened fire at 4,000 metres. Battery L hit the Hayate on their third salvo, and, well, it's not known whether they detonated a torpedo launcher or the depth charges, but the result was an explosion that broke the destroyer in two and killed 168 men out of the 169 that were on board. At the other end of the scale, Kamikaze herself and a second ship, Harukaze, were two of the few Japanese destroyers to actually survive the war. Most of the rest fell prey to submarines. In-game, Kamikaze is a Tier 5 premium Japanese destroyer. She's got 2 sister ships, Kamikaze R, which you can see here, and the Fujin. Functionally, these are the same ship. The only difference is the paint job. Kamikaze gets a fairly typical green and white camo. Kamikaze R gets a blue and white camo that's based on Hokusai's Great Wave of Kanagawa, and Fujin gets a black, yellow and red Halloween Sharktooth number. All the camos give you 30% bonus XP on top of the usual 3% camo and 4% dispersion. Handling is good, but it's not absolute top of the line. She has a top speed of 37.5 knots, 39.4 with Sierra Mike fitted, and that's fast enough that only Minikaze, Leningrad and Kiev can significantly outrun her, but there are a lot of destroyers in the 37 to 38 knot bracket at this matchmaking tier, and there are even some 35 knot cruisers, so don't count on winning any drag races. Her rudder is similar. 2.9 second shift and a turn radius of 550 metres is pretty typical for the lighter tier 5 destroyers, and it's perfectly good for torpedo beat, and even artillery beat if you're at range. Her guns, look, she's an early interwar Japanese destroyer, so yes, she is stuck with the piece of garbage that is the 12cm L45. Basic gun handling is actually slightly better than Minikaze. She gets 6 rounds a minute and 7 degrees per second traverse. But it's worth noting that her high X round is considerably better than Minikaze, doing 2,000 damage with an 8% fire chance compared to 1,700 damage and a 7% fire chance. What it doesn't change is the fact that the guns on this girl are generally for self-defense and finishing off near-dead targets. Getting into a straight gunfight is usually a hilariously bad idea. Of course, if a light cruiser gives you a flat broadside at 5 kilometers or less, feel free to load the armour-piercing and stage a surprise party in her citadel. If the main guns are not great but they'll do, the flak, well, it isn't actually the worst flak in the game, but that's only because Kawachi-e and Mikasa have got no flak whatsoever. Kamikaze's flak setup is, well, it's 2 guys with rifle caliber machine guns. No, I am not making this up. Your total flak protection is a massive 4 damage per second at a range of 1 kilometer. And yes, that is with basic fire training. The only good news is that it doesn't actually matter if you've left the flak on, because your air detection range is 2.8 kilometers, so by the time you can fire at the planes, they saw you about a mile back. That's the bad news. The good news, however, is very, very good. The first bit is her stealth. Base detection is 6.2 kilometers, camo takes that down to 6 flat, and when fully stealthed with camo and concealment expert, she has a surface detection range of 5.4 kilometers and an air detection range of 2.8 kilometers. Minikaze can match her, Isakaze can beat her by 100 meters, Mutsuki is about 100 meters behind her, and then you've got everyone else. Some of the stealthier Tier 6 destroyers can just about break 6 kilometers, while the American and Russian destroyers, and even Akatsuki, are blundering about in the high 6s and low 7s. So unless there's another Kaze running around in a match, or you've somehow gotten into a match with a Kaguro or a Yugumo, and don't ask me how that happened, go blame your division mate, Kamikaze is going to get the first look and probably the first shot of any engagement. And that first shot might be the last, because unlike the tech tree Kazes, Kamikaze still has the legendary, and legendarily overpowered, Type 92 torpedo. This does 68 knots and 14,000 damage, comparable to, say, the T-22 or the Gramiashki, but Kamikaze reloads in 47 seconds thanks to having twin launchers, while Gramiashki and the German destroyers typically need about 70. And if all 6 hit from her 3 twin launchers, which is perfectly possible at maximum range thanks to the tight spreads on twin launchers, then the 84,000 base damage will basically delete anything short of a tier 6 battleship and give even a tier 7 battleship something to think about. The Type 92 used to be the standard Japanese torpedo in tiers 4 and 5, and it's very easy to see just why it gave new battleship drivers a brutal lesson on why sailing in straight lines is a bad idea. And it's this combination of excellent stealth and torpedoes that makes Kamikaze so dangerous in the current metagame. Her gameplay style is the same, regardless of whether her opponents are tier 4 or tier 7. Stay stealth, scout, lob torpedoes from about 6 kilometers, and cap if the opportunity presents itself. There are some ships she has to be careful around, anything faster than her, particularly the Russian tier 7 destroyers, carriers, which can keep her permanently spotted with aircraft, and there's nothing she can do about it except run to another ship and hope they'll chase the bad planes off. And of course you've got the radar trio at tier 7, Atlanta, Belfast and Indianapolis, which can light her up at 8.5 kilometers if they have any reason to suspect she's close, and then rip her to shreds with main battery fire. Everyone else? Targets. That's it. Under the current meta, that is. The proposed radio position finding skill in the works for 0.6.0 is going to seriously hurt the Torpedo Ninja style, and it's going to hurt Kamikaze as a consequence, since she has to close the range, typically to about 6 kilometers in order to attack. This means she'll usually be the closest ship to the enemy, and an RPF-equipped ship will be clued in by the bearing changes in fairly short order. RPF is, of course, currently the subject of a lot of controversy, and it's not a sure thing, but what is sure is that Japanese destroyers in general, and Kamikaze in particular, are going to be affected heavily if it comes in. But that's a problem for later. At the moment, Kamikaze is the best torpedo boat in Tier 5, arguably one of the best in the Tier 5 to 7 bracket, and when Minikaze was nerfed in the recent Japanese destroyer rework, a lot of us thought Kami was going to be joining Gremi and Nikki in the too powerful to sell bracket. So it was a bit of a surprise when she went on sale this weekend in the European, American and Asian shops, and she's cheap. She's coming in at around $13 or the local equivalent for ship and port slot, depending on where you are. European players have a week, Friday the 13th is when she leaves the store there. US and Asia players have a bit longer until the 20th of January to take advantage. And from the way Wargaming are talking, this is going to be Kamikaze's last call in the shop before she heads off to OP land. Is she pay to win, or at least pay to advantage? At present, yes. The Type 92 torpedo isn't reliably available any other way since it was taken off the tech tree ships, and it's a much more powerful torpedo than the Type 6. It is an edge, and you do need to pay to reliably get it. But it's not much of an edge. As long as she is in her element, so long as she is stealthed up and chucking torpedoes, she is an overpowered little honey badger that does not care who her opponent is. But she is massively dependent on her stealth. If she gets caught, particularly by destroyers, aircraft or light cruisers, she is in massive amounts of trouble, and against wary opponents who know how to use their rudders, even the Type 92 isn't a sure thing. Should you get her? Well, if you have any interest in torpedo ninjas, then oh yes, because Kami is the last of the old school Kazes. They are torpedo ninjas distilled and personified. Shipified. whatever. Since she's also extremely cheap by warship standards, and she's only here for a week or two depending on the server, then frankly if you're in doubt, I'd pull the trigger anyway. The only people who won't have fun with her are the ones who just can't get the torpedo boat style. Everyone else is going to have an absolute blast with this little monster. They might even be joined by the battleships. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, farewell.